This is my song. Please stand. Please be seated. That has got to be one of the most beautiful songs that we sing here. And bearing that in mind, I would like to ask you to welcome to the podium our beloved Rev John, who will be bringing us words of encouragement and hope and joy and love and a little homework, I'm sure. We look forward to the presentation this morning. Please help me welcome Rev John.
Good morning, family. Happy Heroes Weekend. And to all those Jamaicans in the diaspora that are tuned in to us this morning in consciousness or watching us on the World Wide Web, Happy Heroes Weekend. And to everyone who just listens to us or watches us, you're in our hearts, here in beautiful Jamaica at the Temple of Light, Center for Spiritual Living. A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Riddle me this, riddle me that, guess me this riddle and perhaps not. Who said that? Jamaican national hero, the right excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey. And I was hearing on the radio that they were asking school kids in the streets, how many national heroes? And people were stumbling, how many national heroes do we have? Absolutely. I had to remind myself in the prayer room as well. But Garvey was a man whose passion and purpose was to change the consciousness of people thereby leading them to the open-hearted acceptance of their fellow human beings, regardless of color, race, or creed. You know, so when he said, "Up, ye mighty race," he wasn't just talking about the Negro race, he was talking about the human race. Up, rise up. And you know, the Master Jesus said, "If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me." Which really means that when we are lifted up in consciousness, the consciousness that has made heroes of so many people over the centuries, that consciousness lifts everybody in humanity up to a higher level of vibration with the truth that sets men free. Now, a little known fact about Marcus Garvey, I don't know if you know, was that he was a metaphysician. Did you know that? He actually studied Ernest Holmes and many of the early New Thought luminaries. And next year, 2018, Centers for Spiritual Living will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of religious science, founded by Ernest Holmes, the teaching known as the Science of Mind. That's in 2018. And I'm going to just prips you right now and let you know that I intend to invite one of the leading authorities on Marcus Garvey, a son of the Jamaican soil, Professor Robert Hill, to be our keynote speaker. And I'll tell you another little secret. He is related to our own Jean Barnes, and I just think she's put in a good word for us. We'd like to have him in Black History Month, but he's such a treasure trove of information on Garvey that we will take him whenever we can get him. But as I contemplated Garvey's analogy of a tree without roots, I was drawn to our beautiful Ponciana trees over on the lawn, over on the west lawn of our Temple of Light here in Kingston. And I just thought, yes, their roots must go deep, those royal Poncianas. And their roots represent our deep connection to the wisdom of our ancestors and the ancient philosophers and early pioneers of New Thought. So those roots go really deep. And the sturdy trunk represents our shared values, our unshakable faith that, as Ernest Holmes says, there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. And then Spirit said to me, there's another way of thinking of that too. There's a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and it can use you. So we can use it, and if we are willing, it can use us to achieve heroic results in our lives, in our communities, and in the world around us. To take the analogy further, the spreading branches of the majestic Ponciana tree represents the various branches of New Thought. And here in Jamaica, Unity of Jamaica, the Universal Center of Truth for Better Living, and Temple of Light Center for Spiritual Living form a trinity of New Thought communities, all blossoming with the bright promise of a better world. And the fruit, those sturdy mahogany-colored seed pods, represent the demonstrations of greater good and the spread of New Thought all across the Caribbean and the wider world. I often wonder, you know, my friends, if Dr. Elmer Lumsden, who founded our church, had any idea how many people would be fed by the seed of truth she planted here in Jamaica when she returned from studying the science of mind in the USA and began teaching it here. And she used to tell the story that somebody said to her, "You think Jamaica ready for all this new thought and new thinking?" And she said, "I intend to find out." That's the attitude. We're just going to go there and find out and to see, to prove this teaching. And that I think you will join me in the belief that this world and this country needs this teaching. There's a charming story told among the Tuareg, one of the most powerful tribal families in the West African region near Timbuktu. And it goes like this. Years and years ago, there was a young Tuareg man who felt he could get absolutely no recognition from his fellows. He didn't feel recognized or validated or valid. And so he went to a blacksmith and promised him a goodly gift if he could just make him a beautiful and powerful sword and a strong lance, so that the young man might kill many men and gain the respect he so desired. You could fast forward that to our young people today, some of our young people. It's not lances and swords though, eh? It's unfortunately guns. But when this young man left the blacksmith, the blacksmith went into the bush and cut down a huge acacia tree. And from the trunk, he carved a great wooden platter of the type used to bear the food in tribal feasts. He employed great care and craftsmanship in bringing out the wood's natural beauty. And when the Tuareg youth returned and asked for his sword and lance, the blacksmith gave him the platter. If he was Jamaican, he would have said, "Oh, what is? What's this?" he said. I told you to make me a sword and a lance because I want my power. And the blacksmith explained that to gain the respect the young man desired, it would be far better to take the platter and fill it with food for his friends and family and relatives and the people of the village. If he did this, everyone would admire and respect him. You can't lead people and earn their respect if they are hungry, the blacksmith told him. The young man thought long about this platter and the mission, the assignment the blacksmith had given him, while other part of his mind was considering what other blacksmiths in the village he might employ for the service he requested. After all, if he wanted a carver, he would not have gone to a blacksmith, would he? So he was torn between the two choices. And eventually, after long deliberation, the young man decided his course of action. He would follow the blacksmith's advice. The first feast to fill his great wooden platter was gathered from his very own farm and the cupboards of his house. And soon he became very widely known. Word of his fine feasts even reached the highest chambers of Timbuktu, prompting visits by great crowds of men and women seeking the honor of his fine company. In later years, the man became chief in his Tuareg village in West Africa. Each year after becoming a chief, the great and wise man sent the blacksmith a cow, the goodly gift he had promised if he gained renown. So, last week, my friends, we had the pleasure of sharing the wisdom of philosopher and theologian Reverend Matthew Fox, who was in Jamaica to participate in the 5th anniversary of the Back to Life Foundation, which is a non-profit organization founded by Temple members Lorna Phillips and her husband Manley Nicholson, who have a mission, like the young Tuareg man, of feeding our young men with the truth of their self-worth and validity as citizens of Jamaica and the world. So, Lorna, I really want to honor you for that. And you will note from the words of wisdom on, I think it's page 7, that Carol read to you this morning, that Fox makes a distinction between a soldier who lives in a consciousness of kill or be killed and takes orders from a commanding officer over him. And Fox compares this mindset to the mindset of a spiritual warrior who obeys the dictates of the spirit of love within him and who uses his or her creativity to carve out of the lumber of life a vessel from which others may be fed the truth of their intrinsic beauty and innate divinity. When Jesus was asked about his healing power, he said, "It's not I, but the Father within," that this power comes from within. And I've been doing some reading about this. Fox also outlines 4 pathways that the spiritual warrior takes. And I find it very interesting. He calls them via, the Via Venita, so via meaning the way. And the first is the Via Positiva, the positive way. The spiritual warrior takes a positive approach. And again, I'm going to just big up Lorna and the Back to Life Foundation, because when they applied for sponsorship for this amazing week that they put on last week, they never got, she said it herself on the stage on Thursday night, 1 red cent. But the spiritual warrior is not daunted by what the world has to say and to do. And Lorna said they felt this was such an important assignment, the salvaging of our young men, that they decided to fund it themselves. Them just gas and go through, as we say in Jamaica. You know, nothing was to stop them. That's the positive way that spiritual warriors take. They look beyond the appearances and the limitations and the obstacles, or as one little boy said, I can see clearly now, all the popsicles are gone. So they look past the popsicles to see their vision and the power of their mission. So that Via Positiva is, for me, a very important aspect of every hero's journey. And then Fox talks about the Via Negativa, the negative way. And this is something that perhaps people sometimes accuse us in Science of Mind of being in denial about. This is the ability to look at the dark side, to look at the problems, to look at the challenges, to look at the shadows within ourselves, and to learn from them so that we can work on them and do something about them. So the Via Negativa is a very important facet of the hero's journey to self-discovery and self-actualization. There's a story about, it's a Russian story, about a robber who was known for his elaborate disguises, and he had eluded the police for many, many years by his ability to disguise himself. And in his current disguise as a Russian Orthodox priest, the robber got wind of the fact that the police were closing in on him. And so he was fleeing, and he came to an inn very late at night. And there he found a peasant in a drunken stupor. He had been drinking vodka all day and was beyond being awakened. And so the robber very quickly exchanged his priest's robes for the peasant's garb and made his escape in the peasant's clothing. Next morning, when the peasant woke up, he found himself dressed as a priest. You know, in Jamaica it's a rotted, something here gone wrong. Am I a peasant in a priest's robe, or am I what is this? So he said, let me tell you what I'm going to do. This may be a bad dream. If I'm really a priest, I'll be able to read the holy books. So he made his way to the church and, of course, went up on the rostrum, opened the huge Bible, and couldn't read a word. And here's what he did, and I think it fits so many of us in this teaching called the Science of Mind. He said to himself, well, you know, I can't read it, but I don't think the priest can either. I think they're all pretending, and I'll pretend too. And so often when we are faced with problems, we think, well, I'm a truth student and everything has to be all right. Hi, how are you? Fine, fine. That time your heart will bust out of your chest. So, you know, the Via Negativa is the ability to look at what the problems and the challenges are, to acknowledge them, not to wallow in them, not to make it cocktail party conversation and to dine out on it, but to acknowledge where you are. You're in pain, you're in grief, you're in whatever it is. And then, as Ernest Holmes has told us, having identified what the problem is, we can turn away from it and affirm its opposite. Does that make sense? So let us move away from the denial and be willing to explore the Via Negativa. And one of the wonderful things that this church and Centers for Spiritual Living centers all across the world do is we provide you with practitioners who are trained in the art and science of spiritual counseling and who can know the truth for you sometimes when your nose is down in the gutter and you can't tell that there's a blue sky above you. For the moment. You know it up here, but sometimes your heart isn't feeling it. Find yourself a practitioner and get some help. And then the fourth pathway is the pathway which Fox calls the Via Creativita, the creative way. And he's very strong on this use of creativity to actualize the hero's journey. And I was very impressed because he was saying one of the things that indigenous people do is they use the drum. And the drumming, if they're in grief, they drum and wail. And that wailing comes from deep in what we call in Jamaica our belly bottom, deep in the center of your being, where anger resides and all emotion. And people talk about, I hate him with my guts. It's really down there in your guts. And that's where you can work on the grief, acknowledge its presence, acknowledge the pain, and express it. So this business about big boys don't cry is foolishness. We need to bawl. Thank God our women get taught that they can bawl, and it's something I've always envied them for. If a woman is in trouble, she can go to her best girlfriend, the two of them hug up and bawl. So I have a good girlfriend, and I practice with her. And sometimes she will come to me and just collapse on my shoulder and cry, and I bawl too. And then when we finish, I say, what am I crying for? What do we this week? So that's the Via Creativita. And then there is the Via Transformativa. I want you to know that at the Back to Life gathering of men on Thursday, we had Fox on Wednesday evening, and the Back to Life gathering on Thursday evening, there was this energy of engagement and this wonderful wave of we can do something, which I just left there on a huge high. And I thought, we have to determine where our priorities lie and what it is we really want to achieve for our young people, male and female, and for our country. And I think that right here in this church, we have the answer. This teaching that's why we're not a redemptive teaching, We're not trying to redeem anybody and pull them out of any sin and shame. We are a transformative teaching, a teaching that seeks to give people the tools that they can use to transform their lives, and transforming their lives, transform the world. And then I just want to share with you that this isn't from Fox, this is from one of my favorite New Thought authors, Joan Borisenko, who says that the main characteristic of a hero, of a spiritual warrior, of somebody who is on the path, is humility. I thought, wow, this is so true. If you look at all the great leaders, the people who have achieved wonderful things on behalf of humanity, there has been this humility, which just absolutely blows me away. Sometimes when we're working at the prison, Reverend Michael Record or myself will say to the men, tell them about Mandela, and say, he was so sure of his mission and so humble in his approach that he was able to find deep within him the forgiveness which indeed freed him from the chains of oppression and allowed him to free his people from the chains of oppression. And so we have a class that we say, blame, shame, and regret keep you in prison. And many of us, outside of the four walls of a detention center, are enslaved and enchained and imprisoned by the blame, shame, and regret which we live in and through and from. We need to put down the blame, shame, and regret and to embrace forgiveness. And so John Borisenko says it this way: like the sun that rises in the east, the God power within us is renewed each day. It can't run out, and you can't burn out. And she notes further that this humility has been in every single spiritual hero and transformative teaching throughout the ages. Humility, my friends. Whether we use it for healing, like Jesus did, or to articulate a dream of a changed humanity, like Martin Luther King Jr., or for social activism, like Mahatma Gandhi and Marcus Garvey, or to articulate a science of mind like Ernest Holmes, humility is at the center of the hero's triumph over circumstances. For you see, all of the heroes that if you examine their lives, to each of them, service to God was linked to serving the God in their fellow human beings and into freeing people from the mental slavery that threatens to just keep them in chains forever and ever. So why is humility so important? Why is it such an important aspect of the journey? Humility may be defined as the absence of pride, and pride in turn can be construed to mean an inflated opinion of yourself. Yes? I may have shared with you how on my 10th birthday I got a much wanted bicycle. And I was really an expert on my bicycle, whizzing up and down the driveway at Sandhurst Crescent, showing off to my brother who was on the veranda with my grandmother. It was his turn to read the Bible to her at length. And I zipped down the driveway, which was out of sight of the veranda. And to this day, I don't know how she knew because she was totally blind. But I picked up a bad skid at the bottom of the driveway in some gravel and had a terrible spill and skinned my knee. So as I got up and brushed off myself and my bruised pride and made it into the house for some Mercura comb and some comfort from my mom, I was giving thanks that Grandma hadn't heard and Dennis hadn't seen the indignity of my fall, when Grandma said from the veranda in a loud, dry voice, "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Proverbs 16, verse 18. I swear to God she knew the entire Bible by heart. And so when we used to read for her in the mornings before school, and you have a long psalm, you skip out verse 4, verse 10, and verse 15, she just sit there smiling angelically. And when you're done and you say, "Amen," she said, "That's lovely, baby John. Go back and read verse 4, 16, and 18. So next morning it was my turn to read to her from the Bible. What passage do you think she chose? But not just verse 18, the entire verse, chapter 16. I recognize, though, that she was correct in pinpointing the transitory nature of personal power, especially when it is accompanied by the kind of conceit that leads us to the mistaken belief that we're better than anybody else. And so that's where the humility is so important. In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5, verse 5, Jesus gives us the beatitude, which is the attitude of being, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And there was nothing meek about Jesus in the way we use the term. He was not a milk and water doormat for anybody. Meekness in this sense means blessed are the teachable. If you are humble, you can learn. You can learn from others, even when it's a painful lesson because they're brought to your attention, your own foibles and your own shortcomings. Then you can say, instead of saying, "Boy, I can't do nothing to please you," you say, "Thank you very much for that feedback. I will think about this. It's been very useful." What a difference, eh? If we could just learn to react and to regard all criticisms and negatives, the Via Negativa, as a learning path from which we can grow into our herohood. Is that a word? Yes. Yes. So I want to just end with you by saying that if you're feeling less than a hero this Heroes Weekend, if you're not feeling that Positiva and you are on the Negativa side of things, I want you to reach for the Creativa and the Transformativa. And the way I want you to do that is to recognize your inner source of power. That power is within you. And the interesting thing about that God power within you is that you don't have to invoke it in any elaborate rituals or prayers. It's there. It has already given itself to you. And all you have to do is to recognize it and to call it forward. So your assignment, you thought I was going to forget your assignment. You know, most people think, when you think of a hero, you think of other people. But your assignment this weekend and this week is I want you to think about yourself as a humble hero. Can we say together, I am a humble hero? Yes. And to allow that sense of the power within you to really hold you close this week, and allow it to help you to see in everyone you meet this week that hero, that potential that is in every single human being. Is that something we can do? It's not all that easy when you have to look at, you hear reports of crime and things that are socially unacceptable. You know, and a part of you is saying, you know, I can't stand this. Somebody just said to me over the weekend, on Friday, this is why I can't live in Jamaica. I said, and I'll name another place. You expect that you're going to find it any different anywhere you go? No, but it's in your face here. I said, because we all know each other. We're a small society, and whatever we do impacts. Am I right? Impact. All of us know somebody who has been touched by something that is not to our liking. But we have to hold the high watch, my friends. This is the job of the humble hero, to rise in the knowledge of your power and that thing within you that triumphs over all circumstances. So your assignment is to see yourself as a humble hero this week. And I'd like to end as I began with a quotation from the right excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and it's on the function of man. So listen up. To me, a man has no master but God. Man in his authority is a sovereign lord. As for the individual man, so of the race. This feeling makes man so courageous, so bold, as to make it impossible for his brother to intrude upon his rights. So few of us can understand what it takes to make a man. The man who will never say die, the man who will never give up, the man who will never depend upon others to do for him what he ought to do for himself, the man who will not blame God, who will not blame nature, who will not blame fate for his condition, but the man who will go out and make conditions for himself. Oh, how disgusting life becomes when on every hand you hear people who bear your image, who bear your resemblance, telling you that they cannot make it, that fate is against them, that they cannot get a chance. If 400 million Negroes can only get to know themselves, to know that in them is sovereign power, is an authority that is absolute, then in the next 24 hours, we would have a new race. We would have a nation, an empire, resurrected not from the will of others to see us rise, but from our own determination to rise, irrespective of what the world thinks. End of quote. And so, friends, let us rise to our feet in honor of this great Jamaican spiritual warrior. Let us stand for all the heroes who have gone before. Let us stand for the hero that is within us. Let us stand for the heroes that have blessed humanity. And let us say together, I rise in the knowledge of the power within me. Together, I rise in the knowledge of the power within me. And I, if I be lifted up, will inspire all whom I meet. And if I be lifted up, will inspire all whom I meet. Say to your neighbor, rise up, my brother or sister. Happy Heroes Day. Rise up, my sister. Happy Heroes Day. Rise up, my brother. Rise up, my sister. Happy Heroes Day. Rise up, my brothers and sisters. Happy Heroes Day. Namaste.